I hope you are having a good day. My name is Christina, and this is Star Trek Fridays, and it's nice to meet you. So I hope you will stay and watch this with me. Um, this is the D. Louise book series. Please hit the like and subscribe. It would be most appreciative. As of this recording, I am inching towards 200. Maybe by the time this airs, I will have passed 200 subscribers. But I've been trying to pass 200 subscribers for 6 months, so who knows. So, anyways, please check out Star Trek Fridays, where we recap the episodes. And later this afternoon, if you like this author, then maybe you'll like this one. Flashback Mondays, where we talk about all different genres, mystery, science fiction, historical, contemporary romance, paranormal, erotica, and Harlequin. We talk about them all. My favorite Romantic Times book review magazine. And then my daily book reviews. So we're doing Victoria Thompson right now and Beatrice Small and a few others. But anyway, we are on season 5. This is disc 3. And we're at episode 209. We're finally going to go out in order. As you know, on my previous disc, it had 208 as part 1 and 207 as part 2. Looks like later websites and stuff, it's been altered. But originally, episode 1 was 208 and episode 2 was 207. I don't understand it. I've asked and I have not received an answer as of yet. So maybe it's out there somewhere. But anyways, we are doing, like I said, disc 3 in season 5, 209 A Matter of Time this week, and 210 New Ground next week. The week after, 211 New Hero Worship, and 212 Violations. Interesting. So we'll get right to it. A Matter of Time. Let's see if I can get through this without any copyright violations. Um, I'm trying really hard here. I'm hoping you're still with me. My analytics say you've already signed up. Oh, and I got my space shirt on, but it is freezing in my house today. Very rainy day. So we get an overview from the captain. Captain's log, stardate 45349.1. The Enterprise is on its way to Panthora 4, where a Type C asteroid has struck an unpopulated continent. The resulting dust cloud could very well create a phenomenon none unlike the nuclear winters of the 21st century. Commander LaForge has begun work on a plan that could counteract the devastation. Geordi says, I'm afraid the numbers coming in are already indicating climatic changes, Commander. Riker says, what kind of drop can we expect? Data says, if the Panthora Spiro forecasts are correct, 10 to 12 degrees Celsius within the first 10 days. LaForge says, if this continues like that, their entire ecosystem will be shot to hell. Riker says, and I doubt they're prepared to cope with that kind of cold that's coming. And then we hear Picard on the voiceover for Riker to please come up to the bridge. Just wanted to show that he was there. I realized I didn't show he was there previously. So we get up to the bridge, and Picard says, are you certain, Mr. Worf? Worf says, there was a space-time distortion, sir, and there is something back there. We passed within 300 kilometers of it. Picard says, it's too close to be a coincidence, Mr. LaForge. Yes, Captain. He calls down to LaForge. And he said, and Picard asked LaForge, would a delay of 1 hour affect your plans? And Geordi says, not unless another asteroid decides to pay a call on Panthora, sir. and data confirms that the odds of that occurring, Captain, are extremely unlikely given the time frame. Picard says, "Thank you, Mr. Data." Then we're back on the bridge again. So this ship appears here, and Ensign, bring the ship about. Let's take a look at Mr. Worf's distortion. Now it's a female this time, but she just says "I, sir," no real lines and no name. Her name is just Ensign. And previously, we've had a record where only the females have had names. In all the episodes, every time there's a female ensign, the female has had a name. Now, all of a sudden, she doesn't have a name anymore. She's just Ensign. That was a rare reoccurrence where all the men ensigns had no names, but all the female ensigns had names, and now this one does not have a name. Whereas all the previous ones, regardless of how small a role, they had names. So that's something to point out here. See, so Lieutenant Senses detected a temporal distortion almost in our current course. There's a small object back there that wasn't there a few moments ago. Worf says the object is 50 kilometers ahead, sir. Picard says full stop, Ensign. Ensign says aye, sir. Picard says on screen. Riker says dimensions, Worf, approximately 5 meters in length, sir. Life signs, no signs of any kind. Our senses do not penetrate the hull. Try hailing it. That's odd. What's odd? We've received a response, sir, but yes, Mr. Worf, he wants you to move over. And Picard's like, we're not moving the Enterprise. And Worf is like, no, he wants you to move over. So Rasmussen appears, and I keep thinking of Rapunzel, or Rumpelstiltskin, or any of those mythical figures that are con artists. Those true false. They're trying to pretend to be people they're not, and that's my whole feeling with this episode. I know he's got to be lying somewhere. We just don't know it yet. So Rasmussen says, "Excuse me, Captain, but you were standing right here where I needed to be. Who are you?" Rasmussen. Rasmussen's the name. Professor Berlinghoff Rasmussen. Ah, this is wonderful. Actually, quite a bit larger than I thought. Really? Rasmussen says, "Where I come from, every historian knows the bridge of the old 1701D. Where do you come from?" "Why, Earth, late 26th century to be exact. I've traveled back nearly 300 years just to find you." I don't believe him. So then we're in Picard's ready room, and Picard is asking him, "What kind of historian are you?" Rasmussen says, "My focus is on the 22nd through the 24th century, early interstellar history. You know, it's always believed that this was on your desk, not here. Fascinating. Don't move it on me. You can't expect me to believe that the layout of my ready room can possibly be of interest to future historians." Rasmussen says, "No less so than your legendary modesty, Captain. If I could describe to you what a thrill it is to be there." And he points at the painting. "That's an original." "Professor, you flatter me, but I can't help but wonder what could possibly have caused you to select me as the subject of your study. Even in this decade, there are far more wiser, more experienced humans in and out of Starfleet." Rasmussen says, "I'd love to tell you, Picard, I really would. But try and imagine what a young Caesar might have done differently had someone given him a hint of what lay ahead, or if Lincoln had been coerced into changing his theater plans. But I truly wish I could be more specific on why you was selected, but I'm afraid the exchange of information would have to flow in one direction only." And then he measures the length of the ready room. Don't know why. Okay, so now we're all sitting down to group questions. And Worf asks the question, "Why now?" LaForge says, "Right. If you've come back to study us, to study the captain, Why would you pick today? Why not a year ago or a year from now? Rasmussen says, oh, I picked the right day, all right. Just wait, you'll see. Do you always sit there on that side of the table? He asks Worf. And Worf says, usually why? Rasmussen's like, not important. Professor Riker says, at what point does time travel become a tool for historians? Rasmussen says, now, Commander, you know better than that. I've studied a great deal about your century, including the fact that you are all quite aware of the dangers of anyone altering the past. And that's exactly what I'd be doing if I were to divulge information like that. Crusher says, the Tellurian plague. I beg your pardon, the Tellurian plague. Was it cured? I mean, did they find a cure by your century? Oh, it can't do any harm to ask that. Picard says, I realize that it's difficult, but we must keep to ourselves questions regarding the future. Go on, Professor. Rasmussen says, I'll be preparing questionnaires for each of you. Please complete them at your convenience. If you're concerned about possible breach of security, I'm sure your captain can make a determination, and thank you in advance for curbing your curiosity. Now, technically, he should have all this information if he is from the future. He should know all this already. LaFord says, if I hand in my assignment on time, can I get a glimpse of next week's poker game? Everybody chuckles. Mr. Data, would you escort the professor to his quarters? And they take him to his quarters. And Riker says, what did he mean he picked the right day? Because as you know everything I do, Will. And they're looking at Deanna. She says, it's hard to tell. He's holding something back. Of course he is. All the things he could tell us, all the things he would like to tell us. It might be that. I don't know. Riker said, what if he's an imposter? Yeah! What if he's an imposter? What if he's lying through his teeth? What if he's trying to gain information about the future to improve the past? Like, oh, I don't know, all the lottery numbers for the next 100 years. Or all the baseball scores for the next 100 years. You saw Back to the Future, right? Maybe he's lying. Maybe he's trying to profit. Maybe he wants some money. Don't know. Picard says he's human. The medical scans have proved that, right, Doctor? Dr. Crusher says yes, he's human. And Picard says there was a temporal distortion back there, correct, Worf? And he's like, yeah. And Picard says no one can deny that a ship like his is unlike anything we've ever seen before. LaForge says the hull is made of some kind of plasticized titanium mesh. We've nothing like it on record, at least not until now. Mr. Worf, I do appreciate your caution. I share it. Bring his vessel into the shuttle bay. Place it under guard. Yes, sir. Because as I realize that this visit is going to be difficult for some of us, but I've examined his credentials and everything seems to be in order. So I think we should extend him every courtesy, including the questionnaire, Worf says. Picard says, including the questionnaire. And I'm like, no. You're telling him too much information. He's fishing. Can't you see? He's fishing. So then we see Data and Rasmussen. This is really a thrill, Data, like running across a Redstone missile or a Gutenberg Bible to think the Model T of androids. Data says, if you're referring to the first production model automobile of the 21st century, perhaps the subsequent Model A might be more apt analogy, since I am Dr. Soon's revised prototype. Rasmussen's like, I stand corrected. So he takes him to his quarters, and he inspects his quarters, and Data's like, is there a problem? And he's like, I suppose it will have to do for now. I'll get you a list of things that I will be needing. And Data says, would I be correct in assuming that you know whether or not I'm still alive in the 26th century? And he gets like, I can't tell you. And then he's washing his hands, and he stands up like, he's waiting for Data to put the towel in his hand like a servant. That is so wrong. That is so wrong. And Rasmussen says it'd be best if you keep your assumptions to yourself. What can you say? He's lying. So we have a voice overview from the captain. Captain's log stardate 45350.3. We've arrived at Panthera 4 and can see for ourselves the impact devastation caused by the asteroid. The entire planet is covered with snow. And then they're in the lab. Picard says, we've located 3 underground pockets of carbon dioxide here, here, and here. Drilling phasers can release enough of the gas to form an envelope which would temporarily hold in the heat of the sun. Mosley says, we spent years trying to avoid anything that would lead to a greenhouse effect, and now here we are about to create one. LaForge says, less than 21% of your normal sunlight is getting through that dust, Doctor. If we can hold heat in with the CO2, that should give the planet time to mend itself. And this woman comes up to Mosley and says, New Seattle's reporting a cloud depth of 12 kilometers. 2 rivers, tropical rivers, are beginning to freeze. And Mosley's like, we better get started. So then we're in 10 forward, and Dr. Crusher, Riker, and Worf. And Riker says, look who's here. And Worf says, I hate questionnaires. Crusher says, Professor, come join us, and they have him come over. And he says, I hope I'm not intruding. Crusher says, not at all. I'm sure you're the topic of conversation at every table in this room. Rasmussen says, as I promised, here are your assignments. He gives out the little things. Please try and complete them by tomorrow. Tomorrow? No problem, Professor. You're all very calm. Is there a reason we shouldn't be? Rasmussen says, history always records where people were, what they were doing, what important events took place, but it rarely remembers their activities, say, a week before, or a day, or even an hour. Worf says, are you suggesting that an important event is imminent? Rasmussen says, I didn't say that, did I? Please go on doing what you're doing and pretend I'm not here. Why is there no record of other future historians traveling back to witness important events? Riker asks. Rasmussen says, we're obviously very careful. As a matter of fact, a colleague of mine and I recently paid a call on the 22nd century vessel. Crusher said they hadn't perfected a quarantine field. She probably saw surgical masks and gloves. Rasmussen says, isn't it fascinating how everyone has a different interest when it comes to history, different perspective on progress? And he keeps looking at his ring. It's a clock, supposedly. Would you mind telling me what that is? Riker asked. Just checking the time, no problem. Is something important supposed to happen here? No, it's nothing. What about you, Commander? What do you see as the most important example of progress in the last 200 years? Riker says, I suppose the warp coil. Before then, the warp drive. Humans were confined to a single sector of the galaxy. Rasmussen says, spoken like a consummate explorer. Riker says, what's going on? Are you expecting someone? Phasers. Rasmussen says, I beg your pardon? There were no phasers in the 22nd century. Ah, you see, Doctor? A Klingon friend is a perfect example of what I was trying to tell you. He views history through the eyes of a hunter, a warrior. His passion lies in perfection of the tools of violence. How delightfully primitive. So, before just talking to a lady, as soon as we input the atmospheric data from Mosley, the computer should tell us how many holes we'll have to punch. And then data comes over, and he says, what have you learned about the tectonic stability around the drilling sites? LaForge says it couldn't be better. Our scans were all clear, and Mosley says there hasn't been so much as a quiver down there in well over a century. Ah, Rasmussen walks in. Just the two I'm looking for, and he hands out their assignments. We're kind of busy here, Professor. Tomorrow would probably be better. Data, we've got 23,000 thermal simulations. Do you think you could check them through for anomalies? And Data's like, certainly. And then Rasmussen and LaForge is working, but Rasmussen is watching Data. And Rasmussen says, is that as fast as he can go? LaForge says, no. Not fast enough for you, Professor? Rasmussen says, there's little known about Data's efficiency, almost nothing about his part in the mission. It's a topic of great conjecture. Data says 209 anomalies, all within acceptable parameters. LaForge says, thanks, Data. You're here to witness this mission, that's all, isn't it? Rasmussen said, it'd be best if you just thought of me as a fly on the wall and went about your business. Data says, I will have your questions answered as soon as possible, Professor. Rasmussen says, Data at Panthera 4. The Ford says, "Excuse me, your prosthesis, what do you call it again? A visor. A visor, right, a visor. You know, I have a picture of you wearing that in my office. How do you like it? It allows me to see. I like it just fine. You know, Homer was blind and Milton, Bach, and Monet and Wonder. A fly on the wall," LaForge says. And again, I want to bring up the point that way, way back in season 2, the other doctor offered to give him implants. And I don't know why they haven't researched this further. I've made LeVar Burton wear this thing forever, but I think it was just part of his identity, like Worf with the things. It was just part of the identity, and fans, I guess, just expected to see it. But in the future, uh, he's got eyes. He's had the surgery. Um, Data says the computer has configured the drilling pattern and specified depths. The Forge contacts the captain. "Captain, we've got everything we need. I'm ready to transport down to the surface." Picard says, "I'll notify Dr. Mosley. Good luck, Geordi." The Forge says, "Gentlemen," and leaves. And Rasmussen steals some things while he's there. So Geordi goes down to the surface. The Enterprise will monitor the CO2 concentrations at 6 different altitudes. If all goes well, it shouldn't take more than 20 bore sites. Mosley says, "Let's hope all goes well." The Forge to Commander Riker, "How are you doing?" "We've gotten word from the monitoring stations. They're all online. We're ready when you are, Geordi." Geordi says, "That's excellent. All we now is an open channel to Data." So they open the channel to Data. "Open the channel, Mr. Worf, and prepare to fire at target 1. Worf, the computer has locked in phaser death calculations. Mr. Data, ready, sir. Fire." Data, "Target 1 is emitting 2,000 cubic meters per second." And then we're back in the lab, and we hear Data say, "Target 2, 1,600. Mosley says, "Surface wind patterns over the target are stable." LaForge says, "You picking up any altitude data?" Data says, CO2 concentrations remain unchanged at the upper elevations. And they do some more shooting. So then Rasmussen comes in and sits down. "Have I missed much?" "Target 14 complete, sir." Data, "What have you got?" "No change, sir." "How are the surface winds, Geordi?" LaForge says, "Holding steady, sir." Worf says, "The computer has stopped drilling." Riker says, "You should be getting some data now." Data says, "Elevated CO2 levels at 20 kilometers, sir." The Forge says, "Now you're talking. We've got some new temperatures coming in. All thermal monitor stations are reporting no further temperature drops." The Forge says, "Correction, Doctor. 2 equatorial stations are showing slight increases." Mosley says, "Thank you all. You've given us what we need." Picard says, "We're glad to be of help, Doctor. The Enterprise will remain in orbit and continue to monitor your progress." Picard out. Rasmussen says, "You've given us what we need. Time. Ensign, return us to synchronous orbit." "Aye, sir." Rasmussen says, "Very clever, Picard, and well done. We've always known how you did it, but to experience the moment, to witness the nuances is indescribable." Oh, I should back this up a little. Okay, so then we're in sick bay, and Beverly is treating an injured knee. So Troy says, "He's after more than a history lesson, I can tell you that." Crusher says, "What is it? What are you getting from him?" "I don't know. He's trying to confuse us, misdirect us somehow." And then he comes in. Rasmussen says, "There you are. Well, that was certainly exciting, wasn't it? Professor, is everything all right? Are you well?" Rasmussen says, "Yes, couldn't be better. Thank you. I just thought we might chat about your questionnaire. Buck up, crewman. Your credit to your uniform." And he's trying too hard. He's sounding old. He's sounding, in the past. He's lying through his teeth. He's trying to be friendly and open and misleading. And some of the crew are treating him, like he's innocent and all this. He's a new thing. He won't hurt them in any way. But Troy's got her suspicion. And why all the questionnaires? Why does he need to know stuff? Um, I've got things to take care of. Troy decides to leave. And he's like, no, 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 stay. I would appreciate your remaining. Doctor, in response to my sixth question, you spoke of a neural stimulator. May I see one? Like he's never seen one before, and that should be in his history books. And it's something that he's going to steal because it doesn't exist in his time period. Um, and he says some more things to other people in the room. And Rasmussen says, Picard's empath won't trust you. That's what they all said. Picard's empath. We're not that unlike you and I. I possess a similar that is foreign to senses foreign to others. My sense of the future is similar. You know, some of my best friends are empaths. They trust me. Why should you care whether I trust you or not? Rasmussen says, we're birds of a feather. We're colleagues. We could learn a lot from each other. You're right. I don't trust you. Rasmussen, I knew you'd say that. I'm sure you did. Beverly returns with she gives him the thing. She just gives it to him. And then Beverly goes talks to her nurse about a procedure, and Rasmussen says, you're a very curious woman. No, I mean curious like I mean you're curious about things, about very late levels, about the future. Well, curiosity is why all of us are out here, isn't it? And he makes a pass at her, and I don't appreciate that either. And she has to sneak under his arms to get away from him. He's just creepy. Um, he says, you know, when I travel back, I meet very interesting people, men and women, but I've never anyone who give me thoughts about not going home. Crusher says, you're not supposed to be influenced by the past, remember? He goes, I'm beginning to feel a little influence. Anyway, I could be your great, 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 great grandmother. And she goes under his arms. It's just creepy. So then we're back on the bridge with Picard and Riker. What kind of questions did he have for you, number one? All he wanted to know about was previous starships, what I thought would be innovative about the last Enterprise, the one before that. He said he wanted to see if we had a grasp of the fundamentals. Data says his queries to me primarily focus on Dr. Stone. And then there's an alarm goes off and they go over to the computer. And Worf says, Captain, I'm detecting massive earthquakes on the surface. 2 earthquakes. Location, both epicenters are beneath the 2 southern drill sites, Captain. And Picard says, is the forge still down there? Worf says, yes, sir. Find him. We've got almost some volcanic activity here, pretty severe. Picard says, magnify. The forge here. Captain Mosley and I are on our way back to the lab. Picard says, are you all right? We're okay, but those were pretty big, sir. If this was Earth, I'd say around an 8 or an 8.5 on the Richter scale. We're starting to see volcanic plumes. Worf says, 2 more eruptions, sir. Data says it's likely we overestimated the geologic stability around the CO2 pockets. And then they're back in the lab. Oops. Mosley was saying we're fairly quake-proof down here. Picard said, it's volcanic dust I'm worried about. What about the dust? LaForge says the ash volcanoes are throwing into the atmosphere is going to compound the existing problem in a matter of days. There'll be no sunlight getting through those clouds. Mosley says no amount of CO2 will help us. Riker says, Captain, take a look at this. And they look over at the site, and it shows that the drilling stuff was matched up. So Dr. Mosley, I have a couple of ideas. We're going to take some time to sort. Picard said, sort them out, Commander. LaForge, Riker says, we came here to help the people, and look what we've done. Oops. Rasmussen goes into Data's quarters. Doesn't even knock, doesn't even ring the doorbell, just walks right in like he owns the place. And Data's got tons of music going on. And Rasmussen says, what in God's name is that? And Data says, music. Rasmussen says, yes, sir, Mozart's Jupiter Symphony C, Bach's Major Brandon Concerto 3, Beethoven's Sympathy, second movement, Molto's Vase, and Lana Doshi Immobile Verdi's Legato. And Rasmussen says, do you think you could thin it out a bit? Computer eliminate program 1. And he's looking over at Rasmussen. Okay, program 2. And he's still looking at Rasmussen. Okay, program 3. And then he does the fourth one, but half volume. Rasmussen says, how the hell can you listen to 4 pieces of music at one time? Actually, I'm capable of distinguishing over 150 simultaneous compositions, but in order to analyze the anesthetics, I try to keep it to 10 or less. Only 4 today? Data says, I'm insisting Commander LaForge with a complex calculation. It demands a great deal of my concentration. Rasmussen says, well, I came to thank you for answering my questions, though I probably should have asked you to limit yourself to 50,000 words. You did ask me to be thorough. I realize it's hard to believe, Data, but a few records of Dr. Sun's work survived to the 26th century. So it would be invaluable to myself and other historians if you could provide us with some schematics. Certainly, as soon as my work is done here. Rasmussen says, as long as it's done by 1900 hours, that's when I'll be heading back. And then Worf context Data. Yes, Worf. Commander LaForge is hailing you from the surface, sir. Patch him through, please. LaForge says, have you rerun the phasor reversal figures, Data? Data says, there's no error, Geordi. The variance must be no more than 0.6 terawatts. Well, I don't see any choice. We'll continue to run the numbers down here, but I doubt we'll come up with anything different. You better inform the captain of the good news and the bad news. And Rasmussen says, which do you suppose he's going to want to hear first? This guy is a kleptomaniac. He keeps stealing stuff. So Picard says, good news. Data says, the motion of the dust has created a great deal of electrostatic energy in the upper atmosphere. With a modified phasor blast, we could create a shock front that would encircle the planet and ionize the particles. Picard says, that would be like striking a spark in a gas-filled room. Data says, with one exception, sir. The particles could be converted into high-energy plasma, which our shields could absorb and then redirect harmlessly into space. Turn the Enterprise into a lightning rod. Precisely, sir. And the bad news, Data says, if our phasor discharge is off by as little as 0.06 terawatts, it could cause a cascading exothermal inversion. Meaning, Picard says, we would completely burn off the planet's atmosphere. Not good. So then Picard has a conversation with Rasmussen. I imagine you know why I've asked you here. Yeah, I have a fairly good idea. Picard says, I'm faced with a dilemma. There is a planet beneath us which is slowly turning to ice, and unless we do something about it, I'm told that in a matter of weeks, thousands, maybe 10,000 will die. Rasmussen says, that's a shame. Yes, it would be quite a shame. Rasmussen, so what's your demo? Commander LaForge has a possible solution. The margin of error are extremely critical. But if it is successful, there will be no more threat. Rasmussen says, and if it's not, every living thing on the planet will die. So do we do nothing and thousands will die, do something and millions could die? That's a tough choice. Not if you were to help me. Rasmussen says, you're not suggesting I tell you the outcome of your efforts. Oh, no, I'm not. Everything that Starfleet stands for, everything that I've ever believed in tells me I cannot ask you. But at the same time, there are 20 million lives down there, and you know what happened to them, what will happen to them. Rasmussen says, so it seems you have another dilemma, one that questions your convictions. Because as well, I've never been afraid of reevaluating my convictions, Professor, and now I have 20 million reasons to do so. Why did you ask to see me? Because your presence gives me potential access to a kind of information that I've never had available to me before, and I'm re-examine my beliefs. Then I must take advantage of every possible asset. It would be irresponsible for me not to ask you here. Rasmussen says, however you come to the terms with your beliefs, Captain, I must tell you that I'm quite comfortable with mine. Picard says, how can you be? How can you be comfortable watching people die? Let me put it to you this way. If I were to tell you that none of those people died, you'd easily conclude that you tried the solution and it succeeded. So you'd be confident to try again. No harm in that, but if I were to tell you they all die, what then? Obviously, you decided not to make the same mistake twice. Now, what if one of those people grew up? Yes, Professor, I know. One of those lives down there I could save. There's a child who grows up to be the next Adolf Hitler or Genghis Khan. Every year, philosophy students have been asked that question ever since the earliest wormholes were discovered. But this is not a class in temporal logic. It's not theoretical. It's not hypothetical. It's real. Surely you see that. I see it all too well, but you must see that if I were to influence you, everything in this sector, in this quadrant of the galaxy would change. History, my history, would unfold in another way than it already has. Now, what possible incentive could anyone offer to me to allow that? Now, he's a little wrong there. He's not changing his past, he's changing his future. So it's not going to change his past because this is, by the time this happens, he'll be dead. This isn't his lifetime. So it's Picard's lifetime we're talking about. Oh, wait a minute. I forgot. He's pretending to be from the future. I'm sorry, I forgot. I'm remembering that he's a lying sack of something and he's from the past. But in this scenario, he's supposed to be from the future. Okay, my error. I forgot that he's posing as 26 instead of 22, where he's from. Okay, I forgot. It's my error. So I have two choices. Either way, one version of history or another will win this way for it. The history you know or another one. Now who's to say which is better? What I do know is here today, one way, millions of lives could be saved. Now isn't that incentive enough? Remerson says everyone dies, Captain. It's a question of when. All of those people down there died years before I was born. All of you up here as well. So you can see I can't get quite as worked up as you over the fate of some colonists who, for me, have been dead a very, very long time. Actually, they haven't been born yet. Of course, you know of the Prime Directive, which tells us that we have no right to interfere with the natural evolution of alien worlds. Now, I have sworn to uphold it, but nevertheless, I disregard that directive on more than one occasion because I thought it was the right thing to do. Now, if you are holding onto some temporal equivalent of that directive, then it isn't possible that you have an occasion here to make an exception to help me choose because it's the right thing to do. Rasmussen says, we're not talking about a choice. It sounds to me like you're trying to manipulate the future. Rasmussen says, Ricard says, every choice we make allows us to manipulate the future. Do I ask Adrian or Susan to the spring dance? Do I take my holiday on Corsica or Riza? A person's life, their future hinges on each of 1,000 choices. Life is making choices. Now you ask me to believe that if I make a choice other than the one found in your history books, then your past will be irrevocably altered. Well, you know, Professor, perhaps I don't give a damn about your past, because your past is my future, and as far as I'm concerned, it hasn't been written yet. And then Riker calls Picard and says the electrostatic conditions are about as good as they're going to get. If we're going to try this, now is the time. And Rasmussen says he can't help. So then they go on the bridge. Picard says, how long will it take to program the phasers? Riker says, we've just got to tie in Geordi's atmospheric sensors. Rasmussen says, so you've made your choice after all, and without my help. Picard says, on the contrary, Professor, you were quite helpful. How's that? By refusing to assist me, you left me with the same choice I had to begin with. Try or not to try, to take a risk or try to play it safe. Your arguments reminded me how precious the right to choose is. And because I've never been one to play it safe, I choose to try. Mr. Data programmed the firing sequence. And he does it. And there she goes again. Every single video, regardless of the time of day, she goes up. Then we get a captain's log, stardate 45351. Dr. Mosley has met with the colony leads and they all agree they are willing to take the risk. We're back on the bridge. Warp says warp power has been routed to the main deflector dish, Commander. LaForge says keep those phasers on active surge control. Worf said we're only going to get one shot at this. Rasmussen says, well, this is it. You have the sequence locked in data? Yes, sir. After 8.3 second bursts from the dish, we'll discharge all EPS taps through the phasers. Picard said, it's time for you to return to the ship, Mr. LaForge. Mr. O'Brien, stand by to transport. I don't think he says that. I have to check. That could be wrong. LaForge says, excuse me, Captain, but I can be a lot of help down here. We're going to have to compensate for density variations right up to the last second. Dr. Data says Dr. Mosley's computers can accomplish the same task, sir, but Geordi would be better able to anticipate unexpected variances down there on the planet. So, Mr. LaForge, you know better than anybody else. There's no guarantee this will work if it fails. LaForge says there's no guarantee it's going to fail. Captain, I'd like your permission to remain here on the surface. And Picard says permission granted. So they do the thing. Phasers firing a wicked red glow quickly spreads through the atmosphere and then pushed back into a single point brain by the blue. A stream pushes out of the Enterprise. They take it, and then they turn around and they shoot it out into space. LaForge says, "See, Captain, I told you there was nothing to worry about." LaForge here, still breathing, Captain. We've got particular levels right where they're supposed to be, and the sun is shining. See, Captain, I told you there was nothing to worry about. Report back to the ship when you're ready, Commander. Doctor, will stay in orbit and analyze the remaining volcanic disturbances, but the best advice would be to let them cool down on their own. Mosley says, I'm getting in the habit of thanking you, Picard. And that's it. So Remison says, well, I'd love to see more, but it's time for me to go. I'm tickled pink to have had the opportunity of witnessing this, Picard. And you did it all without my help. Well, must run. Gotta get some packing done. You know, you're taller in person, Commander. And then Remison leaves. And then they all end up in the shuttle bay. Wow, would you look at this? Who would expect it a teary farewell? Picard says, I'm afraid we're going to have to take a look in your vessel. Remison says, curious to the end, eh? You can't be serious. Picard says, we've been through this more than once. Picard says, a number of objects have discovered missing in the last 2 days, and if they're in your possession, we would like them returned. Merzen says, not here in search of relics, but I'm sure they'll turn up. Worf says, will you not open the vessel? I will, with explosives, if necessary. Remison says, doubt you'll have the means. If we don't get in things, I guarantee you won't either. Remison says, considering the sensitive nature of my equipment, I think you'll understand if I request that only Mr. Data be allowed to see. Why Data? Picard says, because if I order Data not to divulge what he sees in there, he won't, with the exception of anything that might belong to us. Data goes in with him, and lo and surprise, so they go in the ship, and all of the things that he stole are there. Data says, I do not believe any of these items belong to you, Professor. Remison says, nor does this. This phaser is set at the highest stun setting. If I'm correct, that is sufficient to immobilize even you. Data says, why have you stolen these objects to put in a museum? Far too valuable for that. You see, in the century I come from, they haven't been invented yet. But this vessel and the temporal distortion that coincided with your arrival. Oh, this is a time pod, and it is from the 26th century. That's why the poor fellow said, you see, he decided to travel back to the 22nd century. That's my time, and he had the misfortune of meeting me. His clothes fit quite well, don't you think? Took me weeks to figure out how to work this thing. Then you're not an historian, more of an inventor, he says. Up until a few weeks ago, dismissively and unsuccessful one. What are your intentions, Professor? Well, thanks to your captain, it seems my intentions have changed slightly. I was quite content with the notion of returning with those trinkets. I'd invent about one a year, but now look what fortune has graced me with. You will take a little longer to figure out than a tricorder, but it should be well worth the effort. If the auto timer is programmed the way I think it is, in about 2 minutes we should be on our way back to a place called New Jersey. I'm afraid you won't be awake for the ride. And he tries to fire the phaser at Data, and it doesn't work. So, Data stops him, takes him outside, and Picard's there, trying to make my history unfold in a way other than it already has, Professor? This is all a misunderstanding, Picard. Just let me get back in there and we'll forget the whole thing. Picard said, now what possible incentive could anyone offer me to allow that? Data, I believe you will find all the missing items in the vessel, sir. Doctor, a very nice performance. Not all of it. Some of it was real, Captain. Data says he claims to be a 22nd century inventor, Captain. A pity you weren't a bit more inventive. If few things had disappeared, we might never suspected you. As it was, the only stumbling block was your ship. Our senses couldn't penetrate it, but once the door opened, the computer was able to detect, deactivate everything you've stolen, including this. But Ramson says, I'd love to hear more, Picard, but I really must get back in that pod. Take him to the detention cell, Mr. Worf, and notify Starfleet that we'll be dropping him off at Starbase 214. Aye, sir. You can't do this. I've got to get back. I don't belong here. And the ship disappears. Rasmussen's like, oh no. Because I'm sure there are more questions than a legitimate historians at Starfleet will be eager to meet a human from your era. Professor, welcome to the 21st century. So that's the end of A Matter of Time. I hope you enjoyed the episode and stayed with me this whole time. And I hope you will be with me next week for A New Ground, and the week after for Hero Worship, and the week after for Violations. And don't forget to check out If When later this afternoon and Flashback Mondays, where we're talking about 2010 Romantic Times Book Review Magazine. We talk about all genres: mystery, historical, romance, contemporary romance, paranormal, whole nine, and Harlequin. So please check those out. And my daily book reviews. We're going through Beatrice Small right now, and Victoria Thomas, and a few others. So I'd appreciate it if you do that. Check those out for me. And if you didn't see my shorts, I never knew that. It's a really cute, interesting book. A little tidbit on the side. I may do a podcast about this later. But the book stinks. The book itself is brilliant. I love the stuff in it. The writer was excellent. The book itself is excellent. But I bought it from a thrift store, and the previous owner smoked. You didn't know, but paper holds smell. I was once given a Bible a couple hundred years old, and the original owner was a tobacco smoker. After 200 years, it still smelled of tobacco smoke. But anyways, please hit the like and subscribe. Let me know I'm doing a good job. Thank you.